Hello everyone, Joshua Myers here, and today I'm going to be reviewing John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982.
Its origin, alien. Location, Antarctica. Age, unknown. Intent, survival. Destination, man. John Carpenter's The Thing, rated R.
The Thing stars Kurt Russell and it's directed by John Carpenter. So the setting is in Antarctica and focus on these groups of researchers studying some stuff in the Arctic. I don't remember of what, but apparently there was something that came crashing down onto Earth thousands of years ago, and it's now been released, and this thing, whatever it is, could take the form of anything, especially anything living. And it's basically these people who, they start to lose trust in one another because any of them could be the thing, could be like a perfect imitation of them. And it's really like a psychological suspense movie. So what did I like about it? Well, what is there not to like about The Thing? Honestly, I like almost much of everything about it, like the score, I like the atmosphere, I like the setting. It's very isolated, I felt it fit very nicely, I like the characters, and I like the idea and design of the creature. The fact that it could, like, basically shaped into anything, like from dogs to human beings and stuff like that, and the way they're able to do that, like the way it does that is pretty awesome, and kind of intense actually. Speaking of which, let's talk about the creature effects. The creature effects, at least from what I remember, were done by Stan Winston Studios, and it's all animatronic work, stuff, all animatronic work, and man, like, it still holds up. Like, that was the one thing even, because me and Che watched this the other day, we watched it immediately after we watched, The Fog, which was the first time we've seen both these movies, and, this was my second time watching both of them, and even he was really impressed with the effects in this movie. Like, yeah, he honestly thinks they were all really realistic, and like he could believe that's really there, and like he was just so impressed with the effects. He thinks they still hold up all these years later, like 40 years later, and yeah, honestly, I think these effects, like, CGI has got nothing on this movie. Like, seriously, I think if a movie were to be done like this today, it would be mainly CGI, and it would not look as good. Now, here's the thing. I have nothing against CGI. I really don't. I think if used right, it could look really good. And just like with effects, there's good effects and bad effects. Practical effects have also been known for that too. Like, there's been some really good practical effects, but there's also been some really shitty ones. So, yeah, I guess it just really depends on, you know, how talented the person is and able to pull off all this stuff. But the one reason why I prefer practical effects over CGI is because it's something that's actually there, something that's on camera, and something that the actors can interact with, therefore enhancing their performances. I also like the kind of, like, enclosed, you know, like paranoid vibe this movie gets. Like, it gets to the point where the main characters don't trust each other. They all go crazy around each other. Like, they get into fights and everything, and it's like you really don't know who is basically one of those things, actually. Like, any one of them could be like that thing as a perfect imitation. Like, this is really good isolation horror. It's not necessarily straight up horror, it's like horror sci-fi. This is a remake of old black and white horror film called old black and white sci-fi movie called A Thing from Another World, directed by Howard Hawks. Which Carpenter was a big fan of Howard Hawks. It was one of his main. Howard Hawks was one of his main influences as a director, and John Carpenter is definitely my big influence for me as a director. I really admire him as a director, so actually it would be cool to meet him one of these days, actually, so, and maybe be nice to talk about films and that, I think that would be really interesting. I also thought it's paced really well. Honestly, I think it's paced better than The Fog, actually. There's a lot more stuff going on in it. And, yeah. I also really like the ending, which I'm not going to discuss, because, spoilers. If you want to know what happens in that, just go watch the movie. There's this Scream Factory Collector's Edition of this movie, as well as a Scream Factory Collector's Edition of The Fog, which I'm probably going to get those two at some point. And I do have some of the older versions of. I do have older copies of those two movies. I told Che if I get the Scream Factory Collector's Editions of those, that I'll give him my older copies if he wants them, which he said okay to that. So I'm going to give John Carpenter's The Thing a 5 out of 5 stars. Awesome movie. I honestly like this better than The Fog. The Fog is still really good, but I think they did improve on some stuff with this movie. John Carpenter nailed this movie, and I'm really wanting to see more films by John Carpenter. Him and James Wan are one of my biggest influences as as directors go when it comes to horror. Spielberg is another influence. That's it for this review. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.